Twice in my life, I have endured such a high degree of emotional distress from those whom I felt abused their absolute power to such a degree that I felt suicidal tendencies. Once, as a youngster, at a dyslexic learning school called the Ashlock Learning Center, where their method of discipline didn't sit well with me, and I felt it was a systemic abuse of absolute power, and it drove me to the brink of suicide, and that was a tough time. And again, in my 50s, I had to endure some more of this horseshit. And I said, for Christ's sakes, once in a life is enough. So I've come up with a progression of how I believe this happened and how it happens is a systemic way and what the model is. And frankly, I find it to be the escalation of a hate group, and where it escalates from verbal abuse to physical abuse and ultimately a dismissiveness of human rights and a degree of hateful acts, which I have endured to the degree that I filed a civil suit. So in presenting, and for me to digest this experience, I have made parallels to the biggest hate group of all, which is the Nazis. And the similarity is in both cases, the situation drove people to the brink of suicide, and whether or not you feel this parallel is worthy or accurate is up to you. But it's my feelings and it's what I've experienced, and I'm expressing it in my art. And I will share a little bit of the role, the model of the Third Reich and how its experiences of escalating hate was what I experienced. And in doing so, we're going to use the Third Reich as a model and how it is an example of the rise and fall of a hate group. Number one is the desire to grow the group. You can bend towards me. So, Mark Torkelson is my name, and these are my paintings. You've seen the first one, and I'll explain them in regards to how this thing progresses, and the idea that it's an escalation. And this is a Nazi Germany painting of 1935, roughly, when they had the Nuremberg laws, and they began a systemic hate group. And then it goes on to the next painting, which is a Jew and a Nazi, where he suffered indignities of verbal abuse. And I say how hate speech precedes or is a harbinger for acts of hate, acts of cruelty. And I suffered some of the same, and I'll share them specifically. And it goes on to Crystal Knot. So, in general, my experience and what I believe the way a hate group is evolved, and I'm a pilot, I like airplanes, so I use a lot of analogies. ELT, Emergency Locating Transmitter, or the environment, the leadership, and the team is what it takes to grow a hate group. And in my most recent example, which I filed a civil suit, I found that it had all those characteristics of the environment. When I say environment, I mean the desire. They have a desire to make a hate group, not necessarily that that's their goal, but to serve their ends. So this is an environment. For example, in Nazi Germany, their economy was in the crapper. Their people were desperate. So they had this breeding ground for some action. Consequently, the leadership came upon where it was Adolf Hitler. He was a charismatic guy who could do this. And thirdly was the team. Germans were very organized people, and they were highly mechanized. So they had these fundamental perfect storm kind of thing with the ELT. So, for example, if world domination was attained by rhythmic dance, the Brazilians or the Latins would have ruled the world. But it was done through mechanized warfare, which they were good at. And this is the ELT. So I have experienced the same thing, and I'll get into it, but it has to start with a rigged system. And when I say a rigged system, I mean it's a systemic abuse that makes sense to them, and you don't have a goddamn chance. And that was what I felt in this dyslexic school, where It was based on discipline, calling people out, human indignities, and that was their system. So this is the system of the Third Reich. As you see here, coming for a close shot of these two little sons of guns, are Jew man and Christian lady, and you see their belief was that the German blood was superior and that they couldn't have intermarriage because it would dilute the German blood. And they actually made a law, a Nuremberg law, with stating such, so that it became illegal to date or so they would call them out in such a public way as to harass them. Now this was also coupled with other mean acts of indignities and injustices. It was a two-tiered system. So they also said, like, you can't take your money out of the country if you want to leave, and they were just basically feeding them horseshit. And I felt that, but you see, they don't go right to the death camps. They take these stepping stones. So this is section 1, and with the Reich system, touch base on that. But it has to come with, here's number 2. This guy is suffering some incredible indignities where he's being spoken to in a clearly demeaning way, and that was the harbinger of the hateful acts. I put up with a situation like that, where it's a civil rights case that I have, and the person who I have the allegations against was involved in what I see as this systemic group, where it was normal just to roll off the tongue and say, if you want to be gone, you'd be gone by now. And I suffered that indignity, and that really upset me. I gotta tell you, coming for a close shot, I was upset very much, because I felt like this poor son of a bitch. I felt this indignity. Now, because of the rigged system, I suffered the indignity. He doesn't have a chance in hell against this Nazi, because they're outnumbered, as you can see in the first planks. They've got him surrounded. I felt the same way. So what you do is you become acquiescent and you roll with it. And that's what he did. So, Gal said to me, if you wanted to be gone, I'd be gone by now. And now that's a terrible thing to say, particularly for a person who's adopted, who has a fear of abandonment. And it's exactly what happened. I was kicked to the curb in a way that I feel, the allegation is, that violated my civil rights. But you didn't get right to that point of violating my civil rights without these stepping stones. So I'm going to parallel them with the Third Reich, and that's what's going on here. And incidentally, I hope this artwork can inspire you to recognize a hate group and know a hate group and say, as Adam Sandler said in the film Billy Madison, I see what's going on here. So you will take these examples from the historical Third Reich, how they evolved, and if you see this trend, you can say, I see what's going on here. And who did that? I don't know. Maybe the Nazis? That would be a good answer. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 was the Night of the Broken Glass, which is, a few 3 years later, where they set fire to these synagogues, and everybody was in on it. You see all those folks there? This was a group mob mentality, and that what makes it a systemic hate group, because you need everybody signed up, and that's what it was. And it came to the point where such indignities were normal. And I don't have the image of the Nazi's head, because you see his uniform is symbolic of this idea that they're part of the group. And you don't need the face. The face that matters is this old woman suffering this indignity of a person. And of course, this was normal. This was normal to the Nazis, because based on their premise, the system that their blood was superior, this was like, as if you were picking up a roach. And they came to believe that through this, what I call the indoctrination of insidious insular insolence. And it's through indoctrination of steps, and it's insidious because it's gross, and it's insular because it's all about them, and it's insolence because you don't care. And it just seems normal to these people, and that's how it goes, and that's what I experienced. For this comment, once again, to say, if you wanted you gone, you'd be gone, it just rolled off the administrator's tongue as if normal. And that's a hell of a way to be spoken to. But what was worse were the actions that ensued. So we'll go into some of the actions in the next segment. Thank you.